What we do with those means is sometimes a question of controversy. And in order to get closer to that, we have a set now of keynote speakers. And I would like to ask right now our first speaker, Robert Jan Smits, Director General at the European Center for Political Strategy, and of course till March, Director General for Research and Innovation at the European Union. Mr. Smits, we are awaiting your keynote.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I do not need to convince this eminent audience about the major contributions that science and innovation make to Europe's economy and to Europe's well-being. But for those of you who are not yet convinced, a killer figure. About 2/3 of Europe's growth over the last decades has been driven by research and innovation. Europe is a scientific powerhouse. With only 7% of the world population, we generate 1/3 of the world's knowledge. Europe is leading with its top scientific publications over the US, and I'm proud that the European Research Council has played an instrumental role in boosting Europe's scientific excellence. Europe's economy is employing more researchers than the United States and China. So yes, I am very impressed by Europe's performance from a scientific point of view. However, if you look at things from the innovation angle, the situation looks slightly different, notably if you look at innovation driven by digital technologies. As we all know, innovation today is not what it was, say, 10 to 15 years ago. The rise of digitalization has transformed innovation dynamics, accelerating the pace and depth of the disruptive effects of innovation and transforming complete industries. This pace of change is likely to speed up even further as we enter a new wave of innovation whereby the digital technologies increasingly meet the physical world. Europe seems to have been missing out on this, and notably on disruptive innovation. Europe misses many of the unicorns, these technological giants, new champions that have grown to become global innovation players following the rise of digitization. Europe counts today only 26 unicorns in comparison to China with more than 50 and the United States with more than 100. And in addition, according to Fortune, none of the top 15 largest technological companies can be found in Europe. These are concentrated in the United States and increasingly in China. Think of Google, Microsoft, Amazon and Alibaba. I find this worrying, and I'm not the only one. In their reports on the future of the European research, Pascal Lamy and Martin Brudermüller from BASF came to the same conclusion. So what is it that we think we should do? At the European Commission, we see 6 measures. First of all, to step up our investments at regional, national and European level. Currently, Europe invests much less in R&D than its main competitors and trade partners. With an R&D intensity of about 2%, Europe lags significantly behind the United States, Japan and Korea. And last year, China bypassed Europe with regard to investments in the field of science and innovation. Business R&D intensity is in particular very low in Europe. It's only half of that in the United States and 1/3 of South Korea and Japan. Second measure which we are pleading for is to boost, and it was already mentioned here today, venture capital. At the moment, venture capital in Europe is 1/5 the level of what is available in the United States. And furthermore, it is fragmented in many small funds. Third, there is a need to modernize our knowledge transfer system, to modernize our universities and make them much more entrepreneurial, to ensure a better and much more timely dissemination of knowledge and innovation across the economy. As you all know, President Macron has made recently a very strong plea for modernizing Europe's universities. A fourth measure, which we, the side of the European Commission, are putting forward, is to mobilize and involve our citizens much more in the innovation process by making them co-designers and involve them in agenda setting. And we think that through large-scale missions, we can make our citizens innovators. Fifth, fund much more risky projects, projects that aim at disruptive innovation. And here, of course, the European Innovation Council, so much led by Commissioner Moedas, comes into play. And last but not least, the sixth measure, we need to develop right framework conditions for science and innovation to flourish. Europe needs to urgently complete the construction of the internal market and notably of the digital single market. Now, we at the European Commission intend to address a number of these measures in our proposal for Framework Programme 9, the successor to Horizon 2020. We will present this proposal on the 6th of June. I'm convinced that building on the enormous success of Horizon 2020, there will be soon an even larger budget at EU level for science and innovation under the next, more modern EU budget. As Commissioner Oettinger said it, Horizon 2020 is sacrosanct because it is about our future. And he's right. I'm also convinced that the recently created Fund of Funds will boost the venture capital market in Europe, and that through large-scale missions, we will bring research closer to the citizen. And that furthermore, the European Innovation Council will fund disruptive innovation projects. The discussion on the Commission proposal for Framework Programme 9 with Council, Member States and the European Parliament will as always focus on the following topics: the overall size of the budget, the role of the EU 13, what we used to call the EU Member States, the delivery modes, and last but not least, the topic very dear to the heart of German politicians of European added value. On this issue of European added value, which we will discuss later on, as the moderator already mentioned, I would like to remind us all of the famous Riesenhuber criteria, developed in the early 80s by former German research minister Riesenhuber. According to the Riesenhuber criteria, research should only be funded at EU level when there is a clear need for scale and scope. Think about large-scale infrastructures. Or when there is a need to address a global issue, a global challenge which affects several member states, such as Ebola. Or when uniform standards or norms are needed to be developed. Think about 5G or food safety standards. Or when we need to promote the unification of European science and technology. Think about the ERC. I would like to end my short intervention by saying a few words on how we from Brussels see the German science and innovation system and policy. Despite the critical comments which I heard this morning, I can summarize our inventory, our review of the German system in only one word: impressive. You are strong believers in the power of knowledge, and you are putting your money where your lips are, and aim at investing 3.5% of your GDP in science and innovation. And of course, we know that you face challenges, such as the quality of your broadband infrastructure, not mentioned today, but it's very essential, the fact that only a few German universities can be found in the top rankings, the need for scale-up capital for your startups, defining ways to support disruptive innovation, and of course, your challenge with regard to skill shortages. But overall, we believe that the picture in Germany is extremely positive. Many other EU member states are jealous of what is happening in Germany. Let's be clear about that. And therefore, I want to put perhaps in two words what we think about science and innovation in Germany. Sehr beeindruckend. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Smits, for also praising us, but at the same time putting into this charming package a dose of encouragement for future improvement, which we all would very much like to see. Now, I told you already that we received when we prepared these rounds from several contributors, prospective contributors, statements, and we have selected two of these. which will be interspersed in this first round of keynotes. And the first speaker from the outer circle is Professor Indra Spiecker, genannt Döhmann. She's a professor of law at the University of Frankfurt. And I asked her to come here and give her statement. And if we could have some applause for her as well, that would be just fine.
It's a pleasure to be here and speak to you. And I would like to start with a scientific input. The EU and its member states, as most modern Western societies are nowadays, are in their core now knowledge societies. Knowledge determines its wealth, and transfer and the use of knowledge determines its prosperity. The backbone of a knowledge society is research, the production of information, and its transfer into knowledge, which are two different things. It's the search for the new, for the different, for the alternative, for the better, and hopefully for all, or at least most of us, and not just a few. The EU and its member states fund this research, and to no little extent, to say that clearly. This allows, among others, for cost-intensive research agendas, for big consortia, for international research giants, for the professionalization of research proposals. I would like to challenge that. All this has to exist, and it's worthwhile the effort. But there's more to expect of EU research funding in its consequence. The concentration of big funding on large innovation, on big research group within the EU hinders the other side of research. We see little experimental concepts. We see little power of the unusual. We see the same experts assessing the same experts again and again. We hardly talk about social innovation, and not in this round either. We observe the search for certainty rather than the search into the unknown and into uncertainty. What to do? Keep the established programs, yes. Some of them function wonderfully, but also EU research funding should be less bureaucratic and much less determined by content and context. There should be special funding for fundamental research against all odds. There should be, in all fields, complementary to standard fashions in science, thus opening a space for truly new thoughts and true innovation. We need more research funding for small enterprises and single researchers to give them time to do research and to develop new thoughts. Funding should give more incentive to individual researchers and small teams to avoid group compromises and waste in institutional and organizational design. What we need, and that is true for big and small projects alike, are simple and fast procedures. In order to allow for researchers certainty to go into the unknown and uncertainty. This does not guarantee new knowledge. Maybe it guarantees a bit of new information, but it guarantees something else, that we do not lose the best source of knowledge, and that is the minds and the intrinsic motivations of our researchers. And that's something we should talk about when we talk about funding. Thank you very much.